Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Is the Sports Dead Zone Part 1 coming to a close? Well, perhaps not just yet, but you wouldn't know about what has taken place over the last few days. I appreciate you stopping by to digest it all, as this is the J Reels Podcast with J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And as we get right to it, I have to start off with the Dallas Mavericks. It's unbelievable. Actually unfathomable to think that a 5-week stretch in the history of any franchise, let alone this one, has gone through what they've gone through. And I get it that you could even say it's self-inflicted, starting from the ownership at the very top all the way down to the fans. And that's what I'm going to cover here to start us off, because it is fascinating, to say the least, how this is all unraveled from February the 1st through, I'll say, Monday night, because that's when Kyrie went down on the American Airlines Center or arena, whatever it may be, floor in the first quarter against the Sacramento Kings. And little did we know at the time that even though he had trouble getting up, and even though it was a scenario where you knew it was bad, he went to the free throw line to shoot 2 free throws, and you just absolutely 1000% knew that somebody from the high heavens above was channeling his inner Black Mamba down to that free throw line for Kyrie Irving, knowing that around 12 years ago, when Kobe Bryant blew out his Achilles and sunk those 2 free throws, knowing that he was done, he was toast, but he had to gut it out. And with Kyrie Irving on the free throw line saying, "Thank you, God," I'm sure that was a message from not only just the man up above, but from Kobe up above to his young protege, the guy who he had certainly had his tentacles all over, even though it was an understanding that Kyrie was the one that searched out for him for guidance and to be that mentor. But you already knew the connection there. And if you watched Kyrie's Instagram live feed, I believe it was Tuesday morning, you knew that that's what he was referring to, that whole if you know, if you know. So now let's encapsulate all this. And right, I'm not going to go day by day and all the machinations that led to what happened there Monday night, but I'm going to start from the top all the way down to really unpack this. And where does this go as far as the franchise and even more so the fan base? So to start off with the organization, Patrick Dumont, who is now the majority owner, because remember, Mark Cuban sold off a ton of his shares when it comes to being a part of this team, and he still has a minority stake in the franchise, but he is no longer the head honcho. And I'm sure if Mark Cuban was the owner of this team, there's no way on God's green earth that he would have traded Luka Doncic to begin with. Let's start there. And I don't think anybody has stuck a microphone in his face. And of course, he's not going to answer that, because then that's showing up the main guy that's running the franchise. And of course, it's going to make him look stupid and silly. So obviously, for Cuban, he's going to try to steer clear from answering that question, even though that's one that I'm sure it's burning up inside of yours truly, as well as the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and of course, the whole NBA community. But for Dumont, he's got to take the onus here, because I'm sure when Nico Harrison, the GM, broached to Dumont that we have a trade in place, or we're thinking about doing this because of that. And we could go through the whole Luka Doncic trade. We understand it's going to be the worst one in NBA history when it's all said and done. And yes, Anthony Davis has only played the 1 game, very productive, but has not come back since. And there's been just an unmitigated disaster no matter how you slice it. So for Dumont to now have to take up ownership, ironically and of course comically speaking, for him to take ownership of this, because we know the GM, Nico Harrison, he's already on the plank. He may not be walking it, and he doesn't even deserve to get fired. But I'm going to get to him in a second. As far as Dumont goes, there is no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. he didn't have to sign off on this deal. He didn't have to tell Nico, or he should have told him and say, you know what, maybe we should just hold off on this. I get it, the Supermax, $345 million. He's out of shape. He smokes hookah. But even with that, he is still one of the top 5 players in the sport. And I understand you can say, imagine if he was in tip-top shape. He'd be one of the top 2 or 3. Well, 5 from 3 to 1 is not that far off. It's not as if you're talking about Luka being maybe 15th or 16th in the league and he could be top 5. So, and that's why it's a bad trade. And no offense to Anthony Davis, but we understand between the years and also the injury history that he's had. And not to say that Luka's been spot clean when it comes to his health over the last couple of years, but you're giving up 6 years on top of the long list of injuries that Anthony Davis has suffered throughout the course of his career. So, number one, Dumont, as much as he's going to end up firing Nico Harrison, we just know when that's going to come, but he has to look in the mirror to say, you know what, I signed off on this. Because Nico Harrison is not going to do this without the consent of the owner. So that's number one. Number two, with ownership, maybe it wasn't a good time to raise ticket prices on Monday. This was in the afternoon prior to Kyrie Irving getting hurt. But for whatever the reason, he thought that by investing in the team and toward the fans, which, what, to the fans? What, to have more of a better experience outside and inside the arena? To fork over however many millions of dollars that's going to take, where raising season tickets and increasing the $20 seat in the upper deck $4 more to $24, that was going to go well with the fan base, who right now, as you already know, they are in outrage for the last 5 weeks. So you would think that maybe now's not the time to do that. But of course, he ends up putting that out there. And then, of course, the coup de grace was Kyrie getting hurt that night. Now, of course, you can never predict that, and you won't ever want to predict that with any player, obviously including a star player like Kyrie. But it was almost as if the basketball gods had said to him, oh, you're going to do this? Well, sadly, I'm going to do that. And not to say the basketball gods has a play when it comes to injuries, but again, when you tempt fate and when you're already on the hot seat, not to say that he's going to leave or sell the team anytime soon, he just got the team. But you're certainly making yourself out to be a bullseye or public enemy number one when it comes to being the owner in that town, especially a new guy at that. Speaking of public enemy number one, he's probably just ahead of Patrick Dumont, but this is why I'm putting a lot of the focus and onus on Dumont, because this is not all Nico Harrison's fault, but he still is going to be public enemy number one because he's the guy that has to face the media. He's the one that has to answer the questions based on this trade, thinking about culture and defense and things of that nature, where right now it is looking like, I can't even put it into words, to be quite honest with you. We could talk about worst trade ever, so on and so forth. I'm actually looking for worse adjectives because that doesn't even justify this trade and what this has meant to the fan base, what this has done pretty much to the entire city. And then with the Kyrie news, it just adds another layer to this. But for Nico Harrison, and I understand he is on the plank right now. He may not be walking it, and he may be tiptoeing on that plank, but his day is going to come. As I said on my short the other day on YouTube, at JReels, of course, I hope he's renting and hasn't bought a home in that area. And for Harrison, listen, I understand that he tried to make a move that was going to help his team, and it did make sense, although still controversial. Because if you're Nico Harrison, and as I mentioned this maybe a couple of podcasts ago, there's only 5 guys in the league off the top of my head that would even think of trading Luka Doncic for. SGA, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, maybe Nikola Jokic. The only reason why I say that is because he's 30 years old, getting up there, and maybe he's already at the peak of his powers right now, so who knows how much more mileage you're going to get out of him. But you can understand why if they made that trade. And Giannis. No, I'm not going to trade for Steph Curry. I'm not going to trade for LeBron, things of that nature. No, not going to do that. But for those guys, because they're young guns in the sport that you would automatically say, you know what, you wouldn't even think twice about. SGA is going to be MVP of the league. Tatum, still young. I understand the big contract, but winning a championship, he still has prime years ahead of him. Obviously, Giannis, I get it. Maybe he just eclipsed 20,000 points, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But still at the peak of his powers, despite the fact that he's 30. And Anthony Edwards, he's ascending as far as being a top player in the league. Those are the only players that you would trade for right off the top of your head. And knowing that Harrison made this deal, bringing back a guy much older, bringing back a guy with injury history, etc., and look what it's gotten him so far. So this is why the GM is facing death threats, and that's obviously, that shouldn't be happening. And I get it, fans are just disgusted and aggravated and just out of their gourd with what had taken place there in the middle of the night on February 1st into February 2nd when this trade was made. And that's the other thing too, because I've had people at me all the time, even as early as yesterday. Why didn't they get more for Anthony Davis? Or why couldn't they trade him elsewhere where they could have got a boatload of picks? A la Mikal Bridges from Brooklyn to the Knicks, where the Knickerbockers gave up 5 number 1 picks for him. The thing is that this deal was done in secrecy, because if there was any way, shape, or form that it would have gotten out that Luka was on the block, there would have been 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10 teams that would have called to say, hey, what can we get? Or what can we give up to bring in Luka Doncic to our organization? So, and that also adds another layer of intrigue to this. So, for the GM, what more can you say that hasn't already been said? So I'm going to move on from there. As far as the coach, Jason Kidd, and I get it. Kyrie has logged a lot of minutes ever since Luka was sent packing to LA. And here's a guy that's 32 years of age, he's going to be 33 later on in the month, and he has had a history of knee injuries, albeit many years ago. But for him to go down with that injury, you cannot blame Jason Kidd. That happened in the first quarter. It wasn't as if he already logged 40 some odd minutes and this was deep in the fourth quarter. But here's the other thing too. As much as we kill teams, coaches, etc. for holding back their players and load management, you can't kill Jason Kidd for putting out Kyrie Irving there, whether it be from the start of February up until what happened there on Monday night. But Kyrie's going to play no matter how many minutes. Now, 39 minutes is a lot. I understand that. And he would have gotten probably a lot more deeper into the season just to try to get his team into the playoffs. But I got news for you. You can't have it both ways. You can't say if Kyrie has a nosebleed, he's going to sit out and be up in arms over that. To the same point, if he's playing 39, 40, 41 minutes a night, you can't say, well, he's playing too much. Doesn't work that way. So I get it that the minutes are going to be a factor here as to why he possibly hurt his knee, but that's not the case. Unfortunately, it was just awful luck. You can't blame that on Jason Kidd. You can't blame the workload and the amount of work that he's had over the last month as the reason why he tore his ACL. Nonsense. So to me, you can't kill Jason Kidd. You can't get on his case for having Kyrie blow out a tire and then have to pick up the pieces and say, oh, well, Jason Kidd deserves blame here. No, he doesn't. So to me, that doesn't fly when it comes to putting the onus and the blame on him. So it's almost as if, think about this, it's almost as if now, if players are going to play, you're going to kill him for load management, and then now you're going to have a minutes restriction. Oh, well, you can't have him play that many minutes because he's going to shoulder too much load and carry so much of the weight here. What, now all of a sudden minutes are going to be the pitch count of the NBA that we've seen in Major League Baseball? That's why you got to squash that argument. So that's what you have there. And then as far as the team goes, now you have a situation where, based on some of the things that I've read, that the Mavericks may shut down Anthony Davis for the rest of the year. Do you really want your fan base not to show up to any of these games? Do you really want your fan base to protest and picket outside the arena and want to say sell the team and get the owner out where he just got the team and Nico Harrison getting death threats and getting him fired? I mean, seriously? If Davis is healthy and he's able to play, he has to play. Again, load management, the argument I just put up a couple of minutes ago. If he's healthy, he has to play. That's all there is to it. You just can't shut him down because, listen, if he has a torn ACL or something that you know that there's no way he's going to come back from, that's one thing. But an adductor strain or a groin injury that's not ripped from the bone, he's got to get himself back on the mend and back on the court. The Mavericks are literally fighting for their playoff lives here. as now the Suns, which I'll get to in a second, the Suns may have life. So, and I understand that even if Dallas gets in as a 10 seed and have to go on the road to play the 9 seed, right now it looks like Sacramento, and they could lose that game, all right, fine. But you know what? You got to go out fighting. You just can't punt the season and say, all right, well, this is it. Let's just shut down AD. Kyrie, who knows if we're ever going to see him next year, because considering the time frame that's going to take the heel to get 100%, do we even see him next March? So this is just, I mean, you can't even make all this stuff up. And then lastly, let me even just get to this, because this is, to me, where it hits home, because I've been a fan of my teams forever. I'm not a Maverick fan by any means. But if I was a fan of the Mavericks, it'd be tough, because I would have had so many years invested emotionally, spiritually, even psychologically for that matter. But it would be tough to jump ship. But you know what? I would really have to contemplate whether or not I want to root for this team. Because not only the trade, which that in itself is an organization malpractice, because you can't trade a young stud like that and get back what you got. And it's not a diss toward Anthony Davis. But again, it's the years and it's the injuries that certainly have already affected this team, knowing that he's only played, 2.5 quarters? And we haven't seen him since. So for the fan base, believe you when I tell you this, I feel for you. I'm in pain with you, because to experience that, to witness that, to undergo that as a diehard of the white, blue, and green, and knowing that you had number 77, a guy that seamlessly, with Dirk Nowitzki going over to retirement, and in his first year you had Luka there, that he would have been the next guy to play maybe 15, 17, who knows, dare I even say 20 years. And you would have had number 77 go up next to number 41. That is not going to be the case anymore. He's going to be a Laker. He's going to go into the Hall of Fame as a Laker. He's going to get his number to the Staples Crypto.com Arena number to the rafters. And yes, for the 5.5, 6 years that Luka was there, could you put his number there? You could. But what is it really going to mean? The organization said, at 25 years of age, we just discarded you. And as a fan, I'd still be sick to my stomach. Therefore, if you jump ship, I wouldn't kill you for it. And that's all I have to say. I could go on and on about this. It's just unbelievable how this is all unfolded. And again, the Kyrie news, that was just the icing on the tombstone for the Mavericks. And I hope they play it out. I don't know if they're going to get into the postseason right now, because I talked about it as early as Monday, how the Suns, they were pretty much going to be put out to sea. They were 4 games back. And right now, they are 2 games back. And I'll segue to the Suns at this moment. They are 2 games back in the loss behind the Mavericks, 3 overall. And with the spat the other night, you saw it wasn't really a spat, but you could see as Kevin Durant is going to the bench and Mike Budenholzer tries to grab the forearm of Kevin Durant and he just yanks it away. And in the postgame, I understand Kevin Durant, I'm paraphrasing, said that I'm a competitor, coach is a competitor, we're trying to get on the same page, we're trying to work things out, we're trying to make sure that we can be efficient, try to win the game, etc. All right, said all the right things. But again, you're going to see those moments, heat of the moment, that type of scenario, fine. But now, after that win the other night against the Clippers, are the Suns, did they face their turning point of the season? And I understand maybe at the expense of what's gone on in Dallas that they have new life. I'm still not sold yet. I have to see a little bit more. And granted, they probably will get into the postseason now, because Dallas, I don't know if they're going to tank. I don't know if they're just going to punt the rest of the season away. But if the Suns now have any guts and any gumption, this is their time. They could erase, think about it, 5 months of the season, October, November, December, January, February, almost 5.5 months. They could erase what had happened. 4 games under 500, underachieved like no other, the most disappointing team in the NBA. And now they could right the ship and get themselves into the play-in tournament. Now, what will that mean once they get in? If they're, let's say, a 10 seed and they get bounced by Sacramento, or if they host Sacramento as the 9 seed and they lose, now that would be bad. To me, they have to get to that 7-8 matchup in order to, I don't want to say to stamp their season, because even if they lose that game, it will still be a major disappointment. But you get my drift. Right now, just to get in would be a bonus. And then they could kind of see where they could go from there to win one game, then win another to get into the final 8. And then obviously they'll just roll the dice and take their chances at that point. But I would think now they got a crack. Now they have an opening. They need to barge right through it. If I'm Mike Budenholzer, if I'm Kevin Durant, and that was his former teammate that went down, and obviously prayers for Kai, the whole 9. But if this doesn't mean that they rally the troops and get to a point where it's like, hey, that final playoff position for the play-in tournament is ours. We need to go out and get it. Let's see if they do that. I don't think they will. Something tells me that all of a sudden they're going to flick the switch and go into overdrive. Now, Dallas, they may continue to precipitate into the abyss. And if that's the case, then Phoenix is going to get in. But to me, they're going to back in that way. They're not going to go out and earn it. Because it's not as if they're going to win 18 of their next 20. So we'll have to wait and see how that's going to unfold. But just fascinating to see if this is going to be their time to rise here, the Suns, knowing that they have new life. And after what took place there against the Clippers with that little, I don't want to say it was a fight, but let's say a disagreement between coach and star player. So we shall see how that's going to unfold. And obviously we'll take a look at the schedule in a moment. But other news and notes, I know SGA, speaking of him, he scored 51 in the game against the Rockets on Monday night. And I understand there's a neck-and-neck race between he and Nikola Jokic. Now, it depends on where the Nuggets end up. But I think this is SGA's award to lose as far as the MVP goes. And people could argue he should have won it last year. So I would think the voters will look at it and say, listen, OKC's a number 1 seed again. He's had a monster year. He's going to be first-team All-NBA, no doubt. So I would think it's his to lose. So for SGA, another 50-point performance. And speaking of which, James Harden, how about that? 35 years of age, scored 50 against the Pistons last night. And listen, Harden's going to have those moments. He's going to put up numbers. He's still a guy that's efficient. But as I've said a zillion times, and not to belabor it, but let me see this in a big spot. Meaning a game 4, game 5, or even in a game where they need to win in the worst way, or a clinching game. Do you ever see James Harden in a big spot deliver? Absolutely not. So I'll just leave that there. Then you had 2 players last night in the Celtic Trailblazer game score 40 points in the same game. First time it's happened in Celtic history. Oh, wow. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown did that? No. Oh, all right. Maybe it had to be Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, perhaps? No. Wait. Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett? Maybe Paul Pierce, Ray Allen? Not a chance. Dave Cowens, John Havlicek? Going back to the days of Bill Russell, maybe Russell and Havlicek in those last couple of teams in the 60s? Peyton Pritchard, Derek White. And Peyton Pritchard hit 10 threes in the process. Could you imagine? So those 2 guys, one coming off the bench and one starting, put up 40 points in a game as they beat the Trailblazers last night. I know Portland, obviously they're a team that is just wallowing there in the Western Conference. But that was a shock to see both of those players make history for the Celtics, as the 2 players in Celtic history in one game score 40 points or more. Shocking to say the least. And then Giannis hit the 20,000 point mark last night against the Mavericks, to where he's going to see if he can try to go for 30,000 and beyond. And Giannis, that's obviously a big time accomplishment for him, as the Bucks have played very well here. Won 4 in a row. Right now, looking to be the team that could snatch that 4 seed away from Indiana and even the Pistons for that matter. So let's see if they continue to play well. They've actually won 8 of the last 10. So I don't know if they're going to catch the Knicks. They're still, 4 games, I believe, behind the Knicks. Maybe 3 in a loss. Let me check that. Oh, I'll check the standings in a second. So for Milwaukee, now playing their best ball, and maybe this is the time for them to peak, considering they got off to that 2-8 start, just horrid. And now they're looking like the Buck team that we've seen over the years. So let's see if they can continue their ascent there in the Eastern Conference. And then LeBron, I have to bring this up. I don't want to say it's meaningless, because it's combined regular season and postseason. Is it an accomplishment? Absolutely. Is it one that we've ever seen in the history of the league? We have not. But to combine the 50,000 points, all right, it's just another achievement that we have to, I don't want to say manufacture, Because when you think of points, you're thinking just regular season. You're not thinking combined. That's like saying Barry Bonds, who I know for some people don't look at him as the all-time home run leader, but that's like saying you got to include Barry Bonds' playoff achievements with home runs and combine them with the regular season home runs. So what does that mean? Does he have 762 in the regular season? I don't know how many he has in the postseason. So let's say I'm just going to throw in like 12. So now does he have 774 home runs lifetime? I mean, to me, I don't even look at it that way. Or Alex Ovechkin for that matter. Are we going to combine the playoff goals with his goals in the regular season? And of course, I'll get to Ovechkin when we talk about the NHL. So that's why I look at that as like, And I understand that people want to combine these records. Like Saquon Barkley had the most rushing yards in a full season, including the playoffs, that he had throughout this run this year. And I'll get to Saquon later as he hit the big jackpot there for running backs in the league. But, what do these records mean? It means nothing. In 10 years, are anybody going to think like, who has the all-time single season rushing, playoffs, and regular season combined? Nobody's going to care. And that's why I think this is a little bit like, all right, we're just reaching now. Okay, so is it an achievement? It is, but enough. And then lastly, Celtic City on Max. I understand. I didn't talk about that on Monday, and I haven't watched the first episode. You can say, Jay Reels, what? You haven't watched it yet? I'm going to watch it probably later on today. It's going to be on every Monday for the next 8 Mondays, and 9 overall. I am fascinated to see how they're going to do this. And of course, Bill Simmons, who is the Celtic fan extraordinaire, is the executive producer. So you know it's going to be good. And hopefully it's fair across the board, which I think it will be, only because they're already talking about the racial tension in Boston more so during the 60s. And I know the first episode deals with the Celtics, Red Auerbach, the 50s, the start of their dynasty heading into the 60s. And then I believe that's when you're probably going to get the start of the racial tension in the town. So I think it's going to be a fair assessment and portrayal of the franchise throughout the course of its 77 or now 78-year existence. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm going to give you my true and objective opinion on it. So you have that. Now with the standings in the East, now the Cavaliers, are they ever going to lose again? Another long winning streak. Remember, they had 15 to start the year. Now they're in the midst of a 12-game winning streak as they're just going away with the East. And again, a lot of pressure is going to be on the Cavs. When we talk about the playoff storylines in the latter part of April, they're going to be a part of it. Them in Oklahoma City. I'm going to say this right now. We can talk about, what are the Celtics going to do? Are they going to repeat? Or we can talk about, the Lakers with LeBron and Luka, and they could end up as a 2 seed, meaning they'll have 2 playoff series that will have to go through their building before facing Oklahoma City if it does fall that way. And everybody's going to talk about LeBron at 40, trying to get to the mountaintop again to get that 5th title to match with Kobe and Duncan, all that. But I don't want to hear it. To me, the bullseye is going to be squarely pegged on both 1 seeds. I don't know more so Oklahoma City than Cleveland, but we'll discuss it at that time. But they're having just a phenomenal regular season, and hats off to them. And I talked about this even on Monday, where what are they going to do? Win 65, 66, 67 games? And obviously that's one of the remarkable achievements in regular season history when you look at the lay of the land throughout the NBA annals. And what is that going to mean? They're not going to make it to a finals, considering the Celtics could be standing in their way. So just keep that in mind. Keep that receipt there. Then you have Knicks, who are 4 games ahead, and no ifs, ands, or buts. Not as if they're 3 in a loss or whatever. Then you have Milwaukee, Indiana, Detroit, as we know, Miami, Orlando, Atlanta, the same teams as you know. And Orlando's lost 4 in a row, and they've had a disappointing season. They flew out of the gate. They were 17-9. I understand they've had their injuries. Paolo Banchero, Jalen Suggs. One of the Franz brothers has been out. Not Franz. One of the Wagner brothers, excuse me. I'm thinking of Franz Wagner. But his other brother has been out for the rest of the year, I believe with a torn ACL. So it's not as if they've had their injuries. But still, no excuse for a young team, a team that made it to the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs this year, but now they're going to look at a 7-8 scenario where, all right, if they lose that game, they'll play to 9-10. But I'm sure the expectations were a lot higher in Orlando, and right now, 29-34 was not cutting it here in the first week of March. And yeah, I'm not going to go through the rest with the Nets and the Sixers. We already know where they stand. And then out west, OKC, Lakers, Nuggets. Grizzlies have lost 4 in a row. Any concern there? down in Memphis. We'll have to wait and see. Same for the Rockets as they've lost 3 in a row. Warriors have played well. They beat the Knicks there the other night, and they're still in town as they'll play the Brooklyn Nets tonight out in Barclays. T-Wolves have played better, still holding that 7 seed. And as I mentioned on Monday, from 6 through 10, they were all separated by a game and a half at the time. Now it's 2.5 with the Mavericks holding the 10 seed. And then we talked about the Suns, 2 in the loss. But now what? If I do my math correctly, 2.5 games back of Dallas for that final spot. And as far as the schedule goes, tonight, as I mentioned, Golden State, Brooklyn, but you have the Knicks playing the Lakers out in LA. That's always going to be a fun matchup. As we saw that, ironically, the 1st of February, the night where Luka got traded to LA. Philly and Boston, that's your first of your doubleheader TNT with Knicks and Lakers. But of course, Philly, we understand that they are just a dead team walking. Indiana at Atlanta. Houston, New Orleans, no big whoop there. I know Zion's played for what that's worth. Then Friday, your ESPN doubleheader, Memphis at Dallas. You're going to see a lot of Dallas games here, but obviously without the star power. Phoenix at Denver, ESPN doubleheader, as I mentioned. Minnesota at Miami, New York at LA to play the Clippers, of course, as they're out in LA, as you know, with the Laker game tonight. Your Saturday night showcase, Celtics-Lakers. That's going to be fascinating, not only with Celtics-Lakers, but that's actually going to be Luka's first game in Boston since he was a member of the Mavericks when they lost a Game 5 in the building on June 17th of last year. So I understand different dynamic, but now we can add Luka to the Lakers-Celtic rivalry because he didn't play in the first game when the Celtics lost in LA. When was that? Right around New Year's or right after that? So you have that matchup there on Saturday night, which I'm looking forward to. Detroit at Golden State. Orlando, Milwaukee, Chicago, Miami, I guess because they're in that 7 to 10 range. Indiana, Atlanta. And then Sunday, you have your ABC double dip, Denver, Oklahoma City, followed by Phoenix and Dallas. Well, there you go. Depending on where they end up. Now, Phoenix has to go to Denver. And then Dallas, as I mentioned, they're going to host Memphis. So let's see where those two teams stand as Phoenix could inch closer or maybe even, I don't know if they'll catch Dallas then. Maybe they'll catch them from a standpoint of maybe being a half game behind, depending if Phoenix wins these couple of games and Dallas loses those couple. So we'll see. And then ESPN, Cleveland at Milwaukee is your ESPN game at 8. And that's pretty much it. Sacramento at the Clippers. That's all you have there when it comes to the NBA. And as far as college goes, you had Auburn lose to Texas A&M. What does that mean for them? Grand scheme of things, they're still probably going to get a 1 seed in any region. Now, are they going to get the 1 overall? We'll have to wait and see. I think even if they don't win the SEC tournament, which will be next week, conference tournament begins, of course, starting Tuesday, depending on where you're at, of course. And then you have the mid-majors who sure will clinch titles at the end of this week, starting today into next week. But for Auburn, I think they're going to be fine, even if they go to a conference semi. And obviously, if they go to a conference final, there's still going to be a 1 seed. It could be 1 overall when it's all said and done. Maybe Duke catapults themselves. And Duke, right now, they finished their home schedule where the fan base at Cameron Indoor, they're screaming 1 more year, which I have a better chance of playing in the NBA than Cooper Flagg has staying an extra year in Duke. And they'll play at North Carolina there on Saturday before the ACC tournament begins next week. And Duke, who knows? They could end up being 1 overall if Auburn stubs their toe here, meaning that if they lose another game, which they only have 1 more game here over the weekend, heading into the SEC conference tournament, and depending if they lose in the first round, maybe Duke will catapult them and get the 1 overall in the tournament. But Duke, obviously they're going to be a live team, and of course, you have Alabama. You also had Tennessee lost as a 4 seed. And last night they lose to Ole Miss. As I talked about, the SEC is going to cannibalize themselves with all the good teams that they have in that conference. But I would think everything's going to be fine for Auburn. Same for Tennessee. I don't know if they're going to make it as a top 4. But I would take a lay of the land when it comes to the teams that are going to be 1 seeds throughout. And right now, I guess I would have to put it this way. It's going to be Auburn. It's going to be Duke, Houston. Now, it could be either Tennessee or Florida. Now, I know St. John's is currently at 6. If St. John's runs the table here and wins the Big East tournament, and I don't know if that's going to be enough for them to get to a 1 seed, maybe they'll go as high as 2. They'll probably end up as 3. But can St. John's get a 1? I would think if both Tennessee, Florida, I don't know about Houston. I think Houston's going to be fine. It depends on Tennessee and Florida here. Now, with Tennessee losing, and I'll have another game to go before the SEC tournament, and if they bow out second round, or Florida doesn't go deep in the SEC tournament, there could be an inkling of hope for the Johnnies to get to that 1 spot. But I think it's very unlikely that they're going to do so. So I think it's going to be, I think Florida could end up being one of those top 4 teams as far as getting a 1 seed. So Auburn, Duke, Houston, Florida. Maybe Tennessee. I'd have to see how they did head-to-head against one another. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. They may have only played 1 game. Now, Tennessee lost to Florida. As a matter of fact, they split this year. Because I know sometimes, depending, they only played a 1 game. But they played twice, and they split. So not that that's going to factor in as far as, oh, well, Tennessee will have the advantage of Florida. But we'll see as Selection Sunday is now 10 days away. College basketball is certainly going to ramp up here over the course of the next week. And obviously into that, and the tournament in earnest will start today or 2 weeks from today, where we will get into it wall-to-wall college basketball Thursday, Friday, high noon to about 1 a.m. Certainly looking forward to that. But that's what you have there with the college basketball as I take off the high tops and I'll lace up the skates to take a trip around the ice, the NHL. And interestingly enough, with the trade deadline tomorrow at 3 p.m., you haven't had a lot of activity here since the weekend. And makes me wonder whether or not teams are going to really go all in on making deadline deals to improve their chances of either getting into the postseason or having a team know that they have Stanley Cup potential to get to a final and win it all and maybe make that one bold move. Now, is it going to be blockbuster? No, I'm not going to go that far. But again, you get that one guy who has a veteran presence that has won a Stanley Cup to a team that hasn't or needs that leadership guy in the locker room, that glue guy, whatever it may be. And the one team that did that are the Tampa Bay Lightning, one of the 2 deals that have been made since the start of the week. Now, Tampa, they've been on a hot stretch here, as we talked about there on Monday. And for Tampa, as we all know, their recent history, granted, the last couple of years haven't been great, but at the start of the decade, back-to-back Cup champions, and then went to another Cup final before losing to Colorado in that series. So for Tampa, they figured, hey, we're going to go all in. We're going to make sure that we could see if we could ride this sucker to another Stanley Cup final. And after an 8-game winning streak, which got snapped there the other night, although they got back on the beam there and they have won 9 of the last 10, but they made a trade with the Kraken to bring Oliver Bjorkstrand, a good forward, as well as Yanni Gourde, a former player who had been on those 2 Cup teams and a real good two-way player. Traded them, and a big one, I might add, for a 2025 second-round pick and a first-round pick in 2026 and 27. So they gave up a lot. It's not as if they brought back some primetime players. They gave up a lot, figuring that they're going to go all in. Now, even though J Reels, wait, you're talking about a team that's not going all in to get that reinforcement to go to a cup? Well, what did Tampa just do? Understood, but they're the only team that's done that. Am I really going to go about Edmonton bringing in Trent Frederick and Max Jones from Boston? Now, those are 2 good players that you're going to bring on your team. Good from the standpoint of they're more lunch pail guys. Frederick is a guy that does provide some toughness. So you like that if you're Edmonton. I understand the game's not played like that the way it was 30, 40 years ago. But you do need to have some rugged forwards to get in the trenches, to be a pest, and also be a policeman at the same time, because anything can happen at any given moment, especially when you get to playoff time. But I'm not going to get crazy about Yanni Gourde or Oliver Bjorkstrand. Not a knock on them. But it's not as if they were bringing back, let's say, Steven Stamkos, or they're bringing back a guy that is of notable ilk to say, oh, wow, they're really going all in to see if they can get back to a Cup final. And granted that this is a good move, an expensive one for what they've given up, but they figured the hell with it. We have a shot. Let's get these players in and let's go. What is that going to mean for Tampa in the big picture? We'll have to wait and see how that's going to play out. But those have been the only 2 trades that have happened here. And now, as evidenced, here, knowing that we have a little bit more than 24 hours at the time of this recording, what are the Devils going to do? Devils had gotten off to a great start this year. We're in first place for a majority of the first half of the year, and then they've fallen on hard times to the point where now Jack Hughes, their former number 1 overall, is done for the year because he has to get shoulder surgery. So are the Devils going to bring in somebody, maybe not of his ilk or a blockbuster, but someone that could put the puck in the net, that could make plays and at least make the Devils have a round to win, or maybe even 2 for that matter? Because right now, although they're going to be pretty much entrenched in that 3 seed in the Metropolitan, but things can happen fast. And as we know, the Rangers have made a lot of deals. Not that that's been successful for them, but for a Devil team that, with the Rangers 5 points behind them for that 3rd place, and not that that's a sizable lead by any stretch, but if you're the Devils, what do? I understand you can't replace Jack Hughes, but you could maybe get a couple of players, a couple of good goal scorers to at least try to come close to putting up some offensive numbers the way your star player would. And I understand those are tough skates to fill, but the Devils have to do something here. They just can't let the season be, all right, well, I guess we're just going to ride it out with what we have and that's it. No, you got to do something. So the Devils are a good example of a team trying to make a push to bring in somebody to know that they could not only secure their spot to the big picture as far as playing the 2 seed, and that would be Carolina in the first round. But right, they don't want to slip to a wild card, or they don't want to even slip further back because they could be in danger of doing so if they don't bring in a couple of goal scorers. That's just my point. And that we'll have to wait and see. And I don't know what teams are going to try to make moves, if the Rangers are going to continue to bring in players as they've done pretty much from the start of the year. Are teams that are already out of it, like I said, the Bruins traded away Frederick and Jones. Are they just going to unload? Are they going to trade players? Are they going to sell and try to bring back draft picks or maybe young players? That we'll have to wait and see. So let's see what the deadline is going to bring here. And obviously, after this recording, check my YouTube channel if anything does break, as I'll post a 1 minute short about what teams are going to do here, jockeying for position in the NHL. So we'll keep that in mind, or you guys and gals keep that in mind between now and tomorrow afternoon. And then in a weird record, and I just got to bring this up only because Mark-Edouard Vlasic, people who? Why? Who is this guy? Vlasic Pickles, the company? I shouldn't kid about that. But he now holds the all-time record for most shots blocked in National Hockey League history. All right, for what that's worth. 2,165, he eclipsed Mark Giordano, the longtime Calgary Flame, and also he played on Seattle, Toronto. But for Vlasic, all right, kudos to you. And what I'm sure we're going to see an all-time hits record, which when I watched hockey faithfully back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, there was no such thing. Oh, yes, you could block shots and get hits, but now they record them. They're on record. So pretty soon, I'm sure somebody's going to have the all-time hits record. So we'll have to wait and see there. And of course, I'd be remiss not to talk about Alexander Ovechkin, now 10 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky, as he got a goal last night, a power play goal against the Rangers, and a 3-2 overtime victory. So now, here we are. We're single digits away from tying and 10 from breaking it. And I'm not going to regurgitate it. Oh, is he going to break it this year? We want to see him break it this year. I understand. I'm not going to go there, but the countdown is on. And let's see if it gets even closer by the time we get to Monday's podcast. And you know I'm going to talk about this, as I've said a million times, so I'll just leave it right there. Now, as far as overall, the Panthers, with their 4-game winning streak, have now drawn to a flat-footed even tie with the Florida Panthers. But the thing is that the Maple Leafs have a game in hand. No, I take that back. The Lightning have a game in hand, and they're 3 points behind both of those teams. They played 62 games, Panthers, Leafs, same exact record, 38, 21, and 3. And then you have the Lightning, who are 36, 21, and 4. So let's see if Tampa, with their hot streak, could they overtake the Panthers? Could they overtake even the Leafs, for that matter? That is going to be intriguing as we head down the stretch. Capitals, as we talked about, they're fine with a 12-point lead over the Hurricanes and with a 9-point lead over the Leafs and Panthers for the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Then you have Columbus and Ottawa. And of course, the Red Wings have fallen out, considering that Columbus, although they lost, but they won that home and home over the weekend to overtake Detroit for the wild cards. But you have Columbus at 68, Ottawa 67, and then you have the Rangers at 67. But because Ottawa has a game in hand, they have the tiebreaker as of right this moment. So Rangers, although breathing down their necks, and then the Red Wings 2 points behind, or I should say, take that back. Red Wings 1 point behind both Ottawa and the Rangers. I'll throw the Rangers in there. Montreal 2 points behind Ottawa and the Rangers. Bruins 3 points behind. Islanders 4 points behind. And you want to throw in the Flyers 5 points behind. So you have that bit of a logjam there as far as the wild card goes. And not so much out west, where Winnipeg now 6 points ahead of Dallas in the division, where the Wild are in third place, 6 behind the Stars. Although Colorado has the 1 seed as far as the wild card goes, but they're 2 points behind Minnesota to get that 3 seed, which will entrench them into that 2-3 matchup against Dallas. Vegas 6 points behind Edmonton, or 6 points ahead of Edmonton, as they've not played well, and the Kings have hit the skids here, loses 5 in a row, where they're fine in the division because although they're 3 points behind Edmonton, but overall, there are no other threats thereafter when it comes to them maybe overtaking them, because Calgary, although they're 4 points behind, but you'd think LA will survive despite the fact that they have lost 5 games in a row. But then you have Colorado, Calgary, Vancouver, who are tied, but with Calgary 1 win ahead, they certainly have the tiebreaker as of right this very moment. Then you have St. Louis, 2 points behind, or 1 point behind Calgary for the 2nd seed. Then you have Utah, 4 points behind, then Anaheim, and then the rest of the West at that point. So East, logjam. West, not so much when it comes to the wild card. And in the divisions, they are what they are. Although Tampa, Florida, and Florida, and Toronto, certainly look to be in a rock fight. And as far as the schedule, you have Columbus at Florida. This is tonight. Winnipeg at Philly. Yeah, I got to throw in Philly. Boston at Carolina. Calgary at Dallas. That's pretty much what you got there tonight. Tomorrow, Winnipeg at Jersey. Detroit at Washington. Minnesota, Vancouver. Utah, Chicago. That's what you got there. Saturday, you got the Rangers and Ottawa. That's going to be a big game because, of course, the Rangers and Ottawa are neck and neck there, as you know, 67 points. So that's a big game. But your ABC doubleheader, Seattle at Philadelphia, followed by Boston at Tampa. Toronto at Colorado. Dallas at Edmonton. St. Louis at LA for wildcard purposes. And then Sunday, TNT, Jersey at Philadelphia at 1. Seattle at Washington, only because of Ovechkin. Columbus at New York. That's also a big game too, because Columbus number 1 in the wild card. Dallas at Vancouver. Kings at Vegas. So there you got some games to sink your teeth into if you're an NHL fan. But that's what you have there, what's happening on ice. Now let me turn my attention to what is happening on the diamond. Not much really going on there, as we're now, think about it, 3 weeks away from opening day. 3 weeks from today, the baseball season, the curtain will raise. And I understand that you have the games in Japan on the 18th and 19th with the Cubs and Dodgers. That, in essence, will start the baseball season, but we all know opening day is March 27th, so I'm just going to leave it right there. But a few things to note. 2 regarding former Mets last year, and I'm not bringing this up because of the Mets, but for what it's worth, the 2 Jose's, Quintana, the starting pitcher, and Iglesias, the shortstop. There have been rumblings on whether or not Iglesias was going to come back. And I talked about this yesterday on my live stream. Wednesday live streams on YouTube, so subscribe there, people. But we know about Iglesias, him being pretty much the catalyst for the great vibes of the Met comeback from May 31st on. That was the day he was actually brought up from the minor leagues. the OMG, his song Candelita, the performance that he had on the Citi Field Diamond, and his play, which led to a .337 batting average, and their resurgence in the second half that had the best record in baseball. And the reason why the Mets didn't re-sign him, as he's now a member of the Padres, is because he has no options. And with the Met infield becoming a logjam, where you still have Jeff McNeil, who right now you'd have to pencil him in as the starter, making a little bit over $12 million a year. And then you have Luis Angel Acuna, you have Ronnie Mauricio, shortstop, Lindor's there for life. Third base, you have Vientos, who's going to be your first baseman, or third baseman. Of course, you got Pete Alonso at first. And with Acuna as well as Mauricio looking like to be the guys that are going to be a part of that infield, those guys have options. Where if you bring Iglesias, even on a minor league contract, and you bring him up, and let's say he bats .210, and the magic dust of last year does not translate to this year, well, what are you going to do? You can't just cut him. Yes, you could designate him for assignment, but then what was that all about? So that's the reason why I didn't bring back Iglesias. Would it have been nice? Of course. But guess what? Last year was last year. If you could guarantee me a .337 average and he's going to have that same play and same energy, which the energy wouldn't subside, but the production. Because yes, as great of a story it would have been for him to be on the Major League roster in a Met uniform, but he still has to produce. And we saw that down the stretch in the postseason where Jeff McNeil got those at-bats and he played in those late games in that series against the Dodgers, games 5 and 6, where you didn't even see Iglesias anywhere on the field. So that's the reason why he didn't come back. Now, as for Jose Quintana, you have an argument. He signs with the Brewers. 1 year. No, not $10 million. No, not $8 million. $4.25 million. You mean to tell me that Steve Cohen couldn't fork over $4.25 million? And he goes to Milwaukee. And listen, I'm not making Jose Quintana out to be Sid Fernandez. But I've talked about this Met rotation forever. And to bring him back, it would have been nice. We understand that he's a solid major league pitcher. He's a guy that, when he hits his spots, he's tough to face. And with everybody throwing 100 and with everybody throwing 99 and airing out their pitches in 6 innings, this is a guy that is refreshing. He's going to top probably 91, 92 at best. But he's going to hit his spots. A lot of off speed, a lot of off balance. 90 on the corner, 90 on the black, 90 up in the zone, 90 down. That is his pitching repertoire. But I guess the Mets said, nah, we're going to move on. Let's see if that's going to bite him in the rear end. We've seen what happened with Frankie Montas, as you're not going to see him for any time. And Clay Holmes, that experiment, how do you think that's going to go? And Dave Peterson, all right, he's probably going to be your third starter, but Dave Peterson, all of a sudden I'm going to have to rely on him. And I get it, Quintana, are you going to get lightning to strike twice with him? Considering, probably not, but at least he's a guy that we know, and I'm sure if he was back in the fold, he'd be ecstatic. Not the case, so he moves on, away we go. And then Jose Altuve is going to be your starting left fielder in Houston. Now, Mauricio Dubon is going to be your second baseman. All right, obviously they see a lot of promise and potential with him, your double play combo with he and Jeremy Pena, but is that going to be a nightmare? You're going to have a guy who's 5'7", playing a corner outfielder. Now, you could see the young speedster, not that he's young by any stretch, but you've seen a lot of those small outfielders patrol center field because they got a lot of speed and they could cover a lot of ground. But now you're going to plug him in left field? Oh, I don't know about that experiment. They know more than I do, but I'm just saying that now. So we'll see how this is going to take place in Houston once the season begins. That's what I have there with the baseball. Now, as far as the NFL, and I'll close out with that because there's a lot to go on here, and I'll try to keep this concise and compact. Now, the curtain will raise on a new NFL season on Wednesday. That's right. The new NFL season, quote unquote. No games aren't going to be played. The new season meaning that we're open for business. We're open for transactions. And you're going to hear a lot of rumblings probably as early as Monday as to which player is going to sign where when it officially begins on Wednesday. So Monday, when we reconvene, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of this guy's going to sign here, that guy's going to sign there, long-term deal here, 5-year deal here, guaranteed money there. Now, you've already had some players sign that stayed with their team, which I'll get to in a minute. But the free agent frenzy is going to begin, you would think in earnest, come Monday, and then officially Wednesday, that's when it's going to be where all hell breaks loose. But you've had some players cut, and to no surprise, well, their name is Darius Slay. Although he may come back, as there could be a reconnection there between the corner who just came off winning a Super Bowl and the Eagle organization, so I'll have to keep that in mind. Not the case with the other team that wears green, that being the Jets, where Davante Adams, he gets released. Now, Alan Lazard is requesting a trade out of the Jets, and I don't think a lot of suitors are going to be lining up to acquire Alan Lazard. No knock on he, but it's not as if Alan Lazard is Jerry Rice. So I'm just going to put that and leave that there. Then you had Joey Bosa gone out of the Chargers, 9 seasons. Were they memorable? Had his moments, but for a guy that was a top pick, pass rushing extraordinaire, the guy couldn't stay healthy. And I don't know if he's going to get any better in his next destination. Could he go up the highway to join his brother in San Francisco? Quite possible. I can see that happening, but it just depends on how much he wants. So for Bosa, that is a buyer beware if you ask me. I get it. If he's healthy, he could be a game wrecker. But underline, if healthy. Then you had other guys that got cut. Let me see. No, I think that's it. Oh, Tyler Lockett released in Seattle, but then I could tie into DK Metcalf, who now he's requested a trade, and I'm sure there's going to be suitors lined up to want to acquire him because we know the talent and the potential that he has. I don't know if the Steelers are going to be calling for that, but they could use another wide receiver, but I'll just leave it right there. Then you had teams that had re-signed their own players. Well, their name is Saquon Barkley, 2 years, $41 million, $36 million guaranteed. So the Eagles stick it to the Giants again, not only by signing Saquon, not only by Saquon winning a Super Bowl, but think about this. The contract that he signed, I forgot what it was. I think it was 3 for $40. If I'm not mistaken, they said, we'll rip that up and give you a new one. Can you imagine? The highest paid running back in league history. Granted, it's 2 years, it's an extension, but he got paid, and he won a Super Bowl, and he gets $36 million. Who has it better than Saquon? Not many, especially when it comes to the running back position. Zach Bowen re-signs there with the Eagles, 3 for $51. No shock there. Here's one that surprised me a little bit. The Bears, who acquired an offensive tackle from the Rams, I think Jonah Jackson is his name. Not the other who signed also. There was another deal that was made there by the Rams, and they kept one offensive lineman and they got rid of another. But for the Bears, as they try to reshape their offensive line, they traded for Joe Thuney, the 2-time back-to-back first-team All-Pro from the Kansas City Chiefs and 3 straight Pro Bowls for what that's worth. He's a guy that, 32 years of age, all right, maybe money, maybe starting to get long in the tooth, I don't know. But we now watched a Super Bowl there almost a month ago where Patrick Mahomes is running for his life and the offensive line of the Chiefs, who, let's face it, was Swiss cheese then, they're going to give up their all-pro guard to the Bears. All right, so they could have been to anybody, but they're going to give them up knowing that this is a problem and they want to keep their quarterback upright and not running for his life. That's the one question mark I have about this trade, more so on Kansas City. If you're the Bears, you're jumping for joy, and all you gave up in the process was a 4th-round pick for next year. It wasn't even as if they were giving up a 4th-round pick this year, so could you imagine? So, all right, do you, Kansas City Chiefs? That's what I'm sure Patrick Mahomes, he probably spit out his Cheerios when he heard that news breakdown where Thuney out in Chicago right now. So you got that. And then Maxx Crosby signed an extension, 3 years, $106.5 million, $91.5 million guaranteed, which is the most given to a player in NFL history that is not a quarterback. And we talked about this last week where Jamar Chase is looking for a deal that is going to be similar. And even the Bengals had admitted that we're going to pay him the highest paid non-quarterback. Well, guess what? The Bengals got to tell Vegas to say, hold our skyline chili, because that means they're going to have to go $107 million. I don't know about the guaranteed money. $3 3 years or however many years they're going to give him in order for them to top that. So kudos to them on doing so. And then Dallas re-signed one of their own, Osa Odigizua, I can't pronounce his last name. 4 years, $80 million, and they talked about being selectively aggressive this offseason. All right, Jerry Jones. And then Jimmy Johnson retires from Fox after 31 years. And it's weird because I understand when he got let go by Jerry Jones and was on Fox before he got the Dolphin job from 96 to, I believe, 99. So, although he may have been a contributor in the postseason on Fox once their seasons were over in Miami, but that's what I thought. I said 31 years. The guy also was the head coach there. But all right, be it as it may. 31 years, 81 years of age. I'm sure he's fishing right now and enjoying the retirement life. So kudos to him. Who could be his replacement? I'm sure another coach. They're probably going to want somebody else in there. Not another player. They got a million players there to begin with. From Bradshaw to Strahan to they have Gronk there. They have a million players. So you know they're probably going to look at another coach. Who that coach may be right now, I don't know. I couldn't even tell you. And quite frankly, I don't watch these pregame shows, and I just don't care. So a lot of NFL news will be coming down the pike, especially Monday and next week, as their season, as I mentioned, the curtain will raise for business. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is that I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of this wonderful world called sports. If you haven't done so, please, people, I implore you, as an independent podcaster, content creator, trying to earn a living doing this is my full-time job. So I implore you to please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify. The website is jreels.com. The YouTube channel at jreels. Please subscribe there. Throw me some comments, thumbs up, etc., likes. Do it all. Share it with your family, friends, foes, frenemies. A lot of F's there going on. As I try to increase the visibility of this podcast with all the others that are out there. So please take a screenshot if you follow me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast, Twitter, JReels1, just a number. If you follow me on any of those platforms, and of course on YouTube, take a screenshot, send it to the sports fan in your life or even someone that likes lifestyle content, as I'm going to have a lot of that coming up here, especially as the weather gets warm in the Northeast. So to the casual, to the good, to the great, to the diehard, to the kook crazy sports fan like myself, send it to them as early birthday gifts, late Christmas gifts. Hey, follow this guy Jay Reels. He's crazy, he's zany, he's wacky, he's fun, he's entertaining, he's engaging, all of it. Live streams on Wednesday when I talk sports, as I had one yesterday. Check that on the YouTube channel. I pretty much talk similar stuff that I've talked about here today, but it's a different perspective because I'm interacting with fans there. So one more time, people, push it out there to all those who may be interested. I need all the help I can get. The little engine I could. The independent podcaster that's doing it all. Not only hosting, producing, editing, writing, marketing, advertising, social media, you name it. I got to pimp this sucker until I'm blue in the face. But you know what? I want all that smoke because I'm doing what I love. I love what I do. To me, this isn't even work. This is how much I enjoy doing it. Twice a week, 3 times a week with the live stream. There's no other ifs, ands, buts, babies about it. And I can't even enunciate my words at this point, but you know where I'm coming from. Because anytime I sit in front of this mic, and if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, whatever it may be, hey, I know somebody that knows somebody, please, the jreelspodcast@gmail.com. Hit me up. I'll be more than happy to follow up because whether you do or do not know, if you don't know by now, based on my energy and craziness, one more time, I'm built to do this. I was born to do this. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA, talking sports since birth. As long as I'm in front of this microphone and camera, you're going to hear nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything. That happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J-Reels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the J-Reels Podcast, on the flip, baby.